This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com. This show is brought to you by IndyWrestling.us. Check out IWC, RWA, and more. And listeners like you, support this show at patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show.
Hungry as fuck, but I ain't starving yet. Paying for the pain, cocktail dollar set. Never said I was a gangster or thug, but I'm an animal. Beating for the taste of the blood.
Hey guys, this is the Indy Mayhem Show. I'm Mike Sorg at Sorgatron on the Twitter. This is the show we talk with people in and around independent professional wrestling, as we have been doing for a good long time. Please, of course, follow WrestlingMayhemShow.com. That's where you can find this and so many other fine wrestling podcasts, and as well as IndyWrestling.us, where this is also featured. And you can also see a lot of people that we've had on past episodes featured on there, on VOD, on DVD, on the Indie Wrestling Network, however you may do it. And tonight I got, so this isn't a promotion on the network, but this is somebody that we've had to work with recently and on the production side of things, live on Fight TV. If you follow me on Twitter, I know you've seen the images, you've seen the crazy stuff going on out there in Chicago of all places. It was a fun drive 3 weeks going out there from here in Pittsburgh, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm so fortunate to have the promoter of Warrior Wresting on the line right now, Steve Tortorello. Again, I had the fortune, hooked up for the great Mike Marian, another great production guy that I've worked with over the years in wrestling, boxing. He does all kinds of cool stuff. But I got the name with you guys, and it was such a great experience. And thank you so much for coming on the show, because I want to learn more about you guys, because just a little bit of working with you and hearing like little bits of what you guys have been doing and seeing it in action. And I want to have a longer conversation with you that's not around, we gotta get the show going.
Yeah. Or, oh no, the mic is hot. What do we have to?
Oh no. Yeah. Watch what we're saying. Now we can get the real story. So first of all, little icebreaker. Before we get into the promotion and everything, you, of course, we talked a little bit, have you're not here if you don't love it, right? So what is your earliest memory of professional wrestling?
Wow. So I have two. So I'm born in 85.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as a 4, 5, 6-year-old, was, of course, like every good red-blooded American kid, was a Hulkamaniac. And I remember a couple of things. I remember whenever Yokozuna, it was Earthquake, excuse me, it was Earthquake broke Hogan's back.
Yes.
And I remember watching that as like a 5-year-old. And like, I thought about that throughout my day. Like, I'd be at kindergarten or first grade, and I'd be like, can't believe he broke Hogan's back. So I remember that vividly staying with me from watching it on Saturday morning. And then I also remember, so my dad, when I was very little, my dad broke his arm. He's okay, but he broke his arm, and he had to have his arm in a big cast. And myself and my friends just thought, like, my dad is Cowboy Bob Orton, right? Like, my dad can knock people out with his cast, and like, he should never get the cast taken off.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things stand out to me as the earliest thing I can recall in wrestling.
That's fantastic. A fun fact, I do believe my wife did send a get well card to Hulk Hogan when he was in the hospital with Earthquake. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That was the best time. That was peak. That was peak for my growing up.
Yes, it was magical. And I had, of course, as everybody else had, I had every action figure. I had the wrestling buddies. I had all three. They had the Hogan body slam action figure.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Hogan flexing action figure, and I think there was a punching Hogan. I had Jake the Snake. I had everybody. I'd have the ring out in the basement with the entire WWE roster, WWF roster all around, and I'd have tournaments and Royal Rumbles and all of that.
That's awesome. So going from there, so you grew up around this and everything, and I know you've had you've dipped your toe into professional wrestling one way or another over the years before Warrior Wresting. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, where did you you had a love for it? Like, how were you kind of dipping into that?
Great question. So I got out of it a little bit in the 90s, and I came back with Hell in a Cell in 98.
Mm-hmm.
My buddies, who I teased mercilessly for loving wrestling, sat me down one day in summer of 98, and they're like, you're watching this tape. And then, of course, it was like, Paul falling off of his horse, Saul falling off his horse and becoming Paul, and then he sees Jesus in the sun. Like, it was this moment of like, oh my God, wrestling is the coolest thing in the world. So starting from 98 on, I was back in. In college, I actually wrote my honors thesis in American Studies. I was an American Studies major on the history of pro wrestling from World War II to the present. And so I just did tons of research. Yeah, it was amazing. It was so much fun to work on. I went to tons of indie shows in college. So I saw, a very young CM Punk in the high school gym 3 blocks from my parents' house. And so as far as getting into the business after college, after I wrote my thesis, I actually, long story, but I was able to apply for a position in WWE. I did not get it, but I interviewed for a creative writing position in WWE. And then I ended up out in Los Angeles where I was doing a volunteer teaching program. And there I trained in wrestling at Mach 1 Pro Wrestling in Anaheim. I went to PWG all the time. I was just trying to get around it as much as possible. And I moved back to the Chicago area in 2010 and really just went to indie wrestling, went to see as much as I could, absorbed as much as I could. And in 2017, I was had been devoid of a creative project. I'm a creative type. I've run improv and sketch comedy troupes. I've done a whole bunch of different creative things throughout my life, and I was looking for the next thing. And I said, you know what? I gotta get into, in some way, shape, or form, helping to produce indie wrestling. So the fall of 17, that seed was planted, and then Warrior Wrestling was born basically on Christmas of 2017, and we had our first show in spring of 18.
Wow, that's amazing. And again, I was amazed because I've heard of Warrior Wrestling. I've heard, I see you guys on social media. I hear Beastman was showing me a little bit of your stuff a couple months ago from being out there, and I, seeing some of our guys come out there from the Pittsburgh area, and it was always just like, I didn't realize how new you guys were. I was amazed when I showed up there the first show in September, and you guys said that was your 10th show, and I was like,
Yeah.
wait, this is your 10th show, and you have it this together. It's like, I know people that have been running 10 years that aren't as organized as you guys.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that greatly. We've got a great team of people that work really, really hard. I think honestly that comes from all of us who are on the team for Warrior have been running some type of production one way or another for 15, 20 years. So even though we're only 10 shows deep in wrestling, I used to book concerts and run concerts in college. My friends and I, as I mentioned earlier, owned a sketch and improv comedy company. And my day job, as we'll touch on in a few minutes, is I'm the principal of the school. So I do nothing but run giant meetings and events and coordinate things. So really, we didn't jump into wrestling wet behind the ears. We've done events and organization quite a bit.
Yeah.
We just applied that to wrestling.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So tell me a little bit about the germination of this. Like how, other than you needed the creative project, but, again, this is a wrestling show at a Catholic school. And has run solely at the Catholic school. And this, this is also a fundraiser for the school as well?
Yep. So proceeds from the shows go to our scholarship fund, basically to help kids afford to go to school.
Excellent. So I've seen the conversations with places trying to run it in churches and Christian schools and whatever in the area here. How does wrestling go over in that conversation there with your crew?
You know what? Incredibly well, actually, surprisingly. When we did the first show, we had a few people in the community who reached out and, what is this, et cetera, because I think their vision of wrestling was 1998 WWF.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's Sable and
Stone Cold and
all of those things. And I think once we were able to show people, no, it's a family-friendly show. It's action. It's basically Cirque du Soleil, but in a wrestling ring. After the first show, we didn't have any concerns from anybody. It was basically, once we showed that this can be done well and done in a way that's accessible for families, we were off to the races. But there were definitely some people who doubted a little bit. But, my boss at the school took a chance on it, and I'm forever grateful.
Amazing. So again, looking through your history, and this is the roster. I never doing the first show. I didn't absorb how many people were on that show that I saw Wednesday night, that I see Tuesday night. People that I've wanted to work with in the indie wrestling. From the start, was it always a big name kind of affair?
It was, so I'm a real big nerd about this kind of stuff. And when I pitched it to my boss, how we're going to do this, what we can budget for, what the school would make, all of these things. I had a theory very early on that you either need to be very small or very big.
Yeah.
Where independent wrestling shows die is where they're in the middle. They spend a middle amount of money on middle draw names, and they draw middle to low, and then they end up losing money. I think you either need to be very cost efficient and understand that very little money is going to go out, but very little is going to come in, or spend enough money to get the big enough draws that you're going to draw enough casual fans that the show will make money. And so our first show is headlined by Alberto Del Rio versus Jack Swagger in the main event. And it was when both of them were not too far off of their WWE runs.
Yeah.
And so that we shot for the fences, we shot for the moon. And that has kind of been our MO ever since. And we've gotten very lucky in that some guys that we've worked with from the start have now gotten much bigger as we've gone along. So it's funny, people are like, oh my God, you got Brian Cage and Lance Archer and Jeff Cobb. And I'm like, yeah, we've known them for 3 years now. Like, I just text them like, hey guys, we're gonna do a show. You want to jump in? And so we got very lucky by getting in on the ground floor with some incredible talents who have since blown up as well.
That's amazing. And even Brian Cage back then, I think he was probably just coming off a Lucha Underground, so he at least had a little bit of notoriety, right?
Yeah, and I had seen him in person in AAW in Chicago or at PWG in California, and I always thought he was, not to pat ourselves on the back, but we looked at Brian Cage and said, this guy's a blue chipper. This guy is like a talent who's about to break through, and we really kind of hitched ourselves to his wagon, and lucky enough, the horse we bet on paid off.
Absolutely. Versus, a lot of promotions, they kind of build from within, and then see their guys go off and can kind of put that badge on. But you guys had that happen very, very quickly with something like that. And also interesting, like I said, it's a mix of AEW, it's a mix of Impact Wrestling, it's a mix of just independent wrestling stars. What are and I think what the reputation has to help expand that kind of roster, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all credit to Alberto Del Rio, who has since fallen from grace and gotten himself in a lot of trouble. He was a total pro when he was with us, but when he signed on to do our show, that opened up the doors for everybody else. I think people who before weren't responding to our emails, all of a sudden when we advertised him, we got responses to those emails. And then we knew it was very important to stick the landing on the first show, to treat everybody well, to do the best job that we could. And from there, that kind of opened it up. So now we are in the very blessed position where we get a lot of indie talent from across the country looking to make a name and looking to step up, reach out to us. We're very blessed to have that. To now, people are knocking on our door. We're still knocking on other people's doors, still trying to get some other talents that we are trying to woo over to us. But we're in a very good position where a lot of people want to perform on the platform that we have. And we feel very blessed.
Talk to me a little bit about the landscape in Chicago wrestling. Obviously, Chicago is, if WWE was doing pay-per-view there, I knew it was going to be a fun night with the crowd. Again, you mentioned AAW is one promotion I've heard. Revolution Pro, which I think I overheard people talking about working for amongst your crew, which I think was Billy Corgan's, first foray into professional wrestling before going on to do the NWA and taking that over. How a lot of big stuff happening there on a big stage in Chicago, All In, which became AEW, obviously. How was that is that an advantage to do a show like this, or did you have to do the show like this to get your head above water to get noticed next to that? Like how does that from the outside looking in, that's what appears to me, but how is that Chicago scene for you over there?
That is a great question. I think a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. We have so many wrestling fans in Chicago that want to see shows. And I think that's an advantage, because even if they're going to other local indie promotions, there's a subset of several hundred people who would go to wrestling every day if it was in Chicago. And so those diehards, they're going to keep spending money and keep jumping to different shows and keep trying to see everything. So it's great to have them, but also we had to differentiate ourselves. And so when we came on the market, our focus was a lot on Lucha Libre, and a lot on families. We wanted entertainment that was going to be great for families. Whereas in AAW, which is one of the big indies here as well, their focus is a lot more brawl centered. Although we just did have a big brawl, a big no holds barred match. They were more brawl centered, more of the 20-something, 30-something dude in a black T-shirt crowd.
Yeah.
And ours was more Hispanic family with noisemakers crowd. And so we needed to we wanted to attract those fans that come to everything, but we also wanted to get families who aren't going to independent wrestling. And that was the thing. We actually asked this in our first several shows as people bought tickets. Have you ever gone to independent wrestling before? And easily more than half of our crowd had never gone to anything but WWE or a big league.
Really?
And that's what we want. We want family. We want people to see how great live wrestling is. And so many people that we had in those first several shows didn't know that there was such a thing as independent wrestling until they came and saw it in the gym at Marian. So we want that combination. We want the jaded super fans who are spending 3 hours a week on IWTV, and we want the family from down the street who decides to take a chance on this wrestling thing and falls in love with it.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Over the years, again, just the laundry list of stars that have been through there. I'm just looking on your page now, and I'm seeing pictures in one page of Current Angle, Suzuki, as at Will Ospreay, I think. Just a whole breadth of that. Are there any favorites that you've had come in, or interesting experience with some of these talents that come in through the door?
Yeah, I've had nothing but good experiences with people. I'll highlight a few that really stood out. Mick Foley, when he came to Warrior Wrestling 6.
Uncle Mick. Every time he walks in, I'm like, this is everybody's uncle. You're at the comedy show, he walks in and says hi, so it's everybody's uncle. You're immediately comfortable, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And not only was he a wonderful human, but he put so much thought into the segment he did with Frank the Clown. So basically what we did was Frank the Clown had an open hardcore challenge that he was going to fight anybody. And Mick Foley answered the challenge. Obviously, Frank is dating Mick's daughter, Noelle. They had hijinks on the Holy Foley show. But Mick thought so long and in depth about what he wanted to do with this segment. I would get DMs and texts from Mick Foley like, I need salad tongs on Saturday. Make sure we have this. Make sure we have that. And when he got there, he orchestrated this incredible segment where essentially Frank had Foley doppelgangers. He had a Cactus Jack and a Dude Love and a Mankind. And Frank had this whole suit with Noelle's pictures. And they got in this big brawl, and he got the mandible claw. And then Mick was going to light him on fire. And then the students broke it up. And it was just until that point, until Warrior Wrestling 6, I had not gotten to watch the entirety of a match in the arena because I was running around doing 100 things.
Yeah.
And when that segment came on, I walked through the curtain, I took my headphones off, I turned my radio down, and I just watched it. And I was like a kid in a candy store. And I walked back through the curtain, and Eric walked up to me and goes, "Hey, how'd that go?" I went, "It was magic." It was just, if we don't do another show ever, Mick Foley chose our platform to build this perfect pro wrestling segment. So that was just so rewarding for me as a fan. That was a total fangirl moment for me to just be like, I'm so happy right now. So that's one. I'll share one more quick story. Will Ospreay. So Ospreay, we had been on our list forever. In fact, he was supposed to be on Warrior Wrestling 2 in 2018, but travel things changed. He was never even advertised, but he was internally supposed to be on the show. Travel changed. He couldn't do the show. I have been a fan of Ospreay for forever. I've always thought Ospreay was just a walking embodiment of pure talent and like a pro wrestling savant. And we wanted Ospreay. Well, finally in mid to late 19, we're going back and forth with Ospreay, and he gives me literally one date he can do a show. It was after the New Japan tours for the year ended and before they needed to do promotion for the Tokyo Dome. It was, I think, December 13th or 14th. And Will said, this is the only date I can get from Tokyo to the United States to do a show. I said, great, we're having a show that day. And so we built the whole show because Will Ospreay had the date available. And that's the one that Suzuki joined and Angle joined as well. Well, Ospreay misses his flight and books himself another flight to get in because they were all coming in the day before, and scrambles his way to get here. And so we are killing time the night before with Will Ospreay. And me and Eric take him out for pizza at Aurelio's Pizza in Homewood, Illinois, the staple of the South Suburbs. And we just spent 2 hours eating pizza and talking with Will Ospreay. And he went to the bathroom at some point, and Eric turned to me and said something very, very profound. He goes, he has no idea who he is. Meaning, Will Ospreay doesn't realize that he's Will Ospreay. He's just such a British lad, such a great guy, such a genuine, sincere human.
Mhm.
that he doesn't realize he is Will Ospreay. And those are the great moments when you can sit down with somebody who's literally no argument here from anyone. He's at least top 5 in the world at what he does.
Oh yeah.
Maybe number 1 or number 2. And in 2019, I would argue he was number 1 in the world at what he did. And he's just the most humble, sincere guy in the world. And then he went out the next night and had a banger of an incredible match with 5 other unbelievable talents. And it's moments like that. Like, yes, we're happy that the shows do well. We're happy we can donate money to the school. We're happy that we see great wrestling. But wrestling has also brought into my life so many incredible people who just happen to be mega stars in this sport. So all that to say, those are 2 moments that stand out to me. Mick Foley and Will Ospreay. Those are memories I will hold. If it all ends tomorrow, those are memories I will hold forever of my time in wrestling.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. I know a couple of personalities like that just don't know how good they are. That's it's amazing to see.
Yeah, and you always get the flip side of that too, right? There's some guy from Nowheresville, whoever, who wants 4 times what you're paying an actual star and has a lot of ideas about what his match should be. And then the flip side of that is Will Ospreay, like, let's just go out there and have fun tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's such a
let's talk about the transition into the current quote COVID era. I've been one that's kind of been against doing live shows through the summer for a lot of the promotions I work with. Just of course, our situation here in Pennsylvania is a little different than Chicago, just for the commission and everything, obviously. But I remember seeing a tweet in early mid August and saw this probably a drone shot, I imagine, of the football field and everybody spread out and a wrestling match happening. And I retweeted and said, "This is how you do wrestling right now in independent wrestling." And very fortunate that I had the opportunity to a month later come out with you guys. Can you talk about that transition to, everything shutting down, where you guys were at, to getting to that first stadium show?
Yeah, it's been weird. It's been weird for everybody. And we honestly did not think. So at first we thought, all right, this pandemic's happening. We're going to be out of commission March, April, May. We'll be back with a show in June. As we got to late April, into May, it's like, all right, nope, no, this is much longer than anybody had any right to fear. Then we thought, all right, we're not doing shows anymore, not for the foreseeable future. So that's when we did a watch along on Twitch, and we did a best of DVD, and we did some other things just to keep people, we surveyed all of our fans about a lot of things. And then in late June, the governor of Illinois came out with their directions for outdoor seated spectator events. And I forgot how it got sent. Somebody sent it to me, and I read it, and I went, well, wait a second, this we can do. And actually, my buddy Eric had pitched a year before, in summer of 19, Eric had pitched the idea that we should do an event called Friday Night Lights outdoors on the football field and make it like a picnic and BYO and yada, yada, yada. And we didn't do it for scheduling and a variety of other reasons. Well, in late June of this year, we read the governor's thing, and I called Eric and I said, you remember your idea from last year? Read this. And we basically went, we can do it. We can do exactly what the governor said will be safe with our idea. And it took we had to figure out how we're going to space people. So that's where we came up with the idea for the orange cones.
Yeah.
And the cones are all over the field, and your party can sit at a cone. But we followed all of the governor's guidance to a T, and we looked at each other and we went, we can do wrestling safely. And if we didn't believe we could do it safely, we never would have done it. And so the first one was Friday Night Lights on August 7th. And it went off without a hitch. And then we surveyed everybody afterwards. How safe did you feel, et cetera? And it was, 1 to 5 Likert scale. And it was, 99% on the 5 that people felt safe and that we had done it well. And that's when we sat down and went, all right, do we do this again? And knowing that it would have to be outside, we said, well, let's do it a handful. Let's do it 3 more times. And then the weather will change. And then we'll go into hibernation for the winter. And that's what we did. That's what became the Stadium Series, and that's what became your creative touch on our production.
It was fantastic. So, and you guys definitely went all out with those last few shows, obviously. And it was a lot of fun to do that. So and looking forward, like, depending on where you are in spring, I guess even without, you're kind of sold on doing these stadium shows for the summers, at least in the ongoing future.
Absolutely.
Right?
We had a lot of people who said this is better than being indoors. Let's always do it and use indoors as a rain date. We've had other people who said post-COVID, do a few during the year indoors and then have a big summer one outdoors. It'll be like our WrestleMania outdoors.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What's your high point from the Stadium Series and Friday Night Lights so far?
Oh my gosh. There's a couple. Number one was Kylie and Tessa, because there's just so much that goes into the two of them as individuals.
Yeah.
And the fact that they got to have that match, so totally behind the curtains here, no kayfabe, everything dead. Those are two of the best humans I've ever met in my entire life. And honestly, watching Tessa's name get dragged through the mud from a lot of people who jumped to conclusions and made assumptions and attacked without knowing the human being. Having Tessa willing to come out of, not retirement, but to come out of hiatus and do the show, and knowing what doing the show meant to her. I won't spoil or share too much that's personal and individual, but knowing how much it meant to her to be able to do a show and to be able to do our show and to have that match with Kylie, and knowing what that just meant to the two of them individually as humans. That was something really special for me. I put that up there, like I said before, with Foley and with Ospreay, as if it all ends tomorrow, here are human moments that meant a lot to me. So Kylie defeating Tessa would definitely be at least tied for number one. I think the brawl, the no holds barred street fight between Robert Ego Anthony and Frank the Clown versus Joey Janela was magic. I think they laid out and executed an incredible professional wrestling match, and the final spot went off without a hitch in an unbelievable fashion, in a way that was just truly memorable. So I would add that up there as well. I would also say the evolution of the Rascalz. Trey Miguel winning the title at the end of the Stadium Series was not a foregone conclusion. In fact, everything was up in the air with that match, with Brian Cage's match having to do rework because Zayn was out, etc. And when we put that match together with Pillman, Cage, and Trey, we put that match together that way because it could go any way. And we know we would be happy with any of the three ways that match went. And when Trey won the belt, he had not told his girlfriend, Alicia too. He had not told Zachary Wentz. In fact, he worked them, and they thought the finish was something different. So I was standing on the stage when it went down, and Zachary Wentz nearly jumped out of the bleachers, ran around the fence, came up to me on the stage, and he just said, "Can I go out there?" I said, "Absolutely." And he just bolted to the ring, slid in, and just hugged Trey, the tightest hug I've ever seen. And that was pure emotion because Zach did not know the finish of that match. So just as I had shared before with Foley and Ospreay, the Tessa Kylie match and that main event and its finish were human moments that meant a lot to me in this series.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So tell me, we usually like to end with a little bit of there's ups and downs in indie wrestling, and this is probably more for the wrestlers, but I'm sure you run into stuff on your side. What's the best and the worst thing about running an indie wrestling show?
Wow. The best thing, I'll just echo what I've already said. It's the people. We have, I think, by the way we try to run and by who has been drawn to our shows, we only really have great humans that we work with, and they all want to do a really good job because we all get along, right? It's not a date for, it's not just a date on the books to take a match for guys. Like, guys want to have great matches. They want to do a good job. They look forward to being with us, and we look forward to having them. So I think that camaraderie is the best part of indie wrestling when it's done well. And I've seen that done in other places too. Not to say by any means that we have a monopoly on that, but when that camaraderie is developed, that's the best thing. I think the worst thing, gosh, every now and then you have to run into some of the politics of indie wrestling and of the old Carney way here and there from people. But I would say that is very few and far between with us. And I think that's because of the people that we keep on our roster, because of the way that we run our shows. So that's a pain in the butt when it happens, but 95 times out of 100, it doesn't happen. And even enduring that is absolutely worth it for the moments like Tessa returning, the moments like Trey getting squeezed by Zach, the moments like Janela pulling off the goalpost swanton, and then us talking to him in the back afterwards. And we're like, "Why did you jump from the edge? It's much more sturdy in the middle." And he goes, "It's much more sturdy in the middle." Like, yes. So like those kind of things make it all worthwhile.
That's amazing. Well, and if people want to see everything that's going on, of course, all those shows were out on Fight TV. for the Stadium Series, and I know I just got the email today that they just debuted on Highspots as well, if you want to check those out.
Yep, as are all of our old shows. So if you're new to us, if you just saw the Joey Janela leap, or just saw Tessa's return, or just saw Cajun Carter, which is unbelievable, go back and watch all the old stuff, not only to give us a watch, but also to see some great talents do their things. I mean, Team White Wolf, A-Kid and Carlos Romo had a match with the Lucha Brothers that just tore the house down. Bandito and Brian Cage, SCU and OVE. There's some really great stuff in the deep catalog, so go watch it on Highspots.
There you go. It's a lot of good stuff. Nothing but good things going out there. It was a lot of fun, and I'm always happy when there's a good, easy crew to work with, and very, everybody helps with anything I needed to get the show off the ground on my end, on the stream and everything. And it was a lot of fun to meet all the guys out there and be a part of that. So,
Mike, thank you for helping. Thank you for having me today. It's great to get to know you as well and add you to that collection of great people in wrestling. And I'm sure we'll work together again in the future.
Awesome. What's the website for you guys and on social media?
We're warriorwrestling.net, and social media is at Warrior Wrestling, but no vowels in wrestling. So WRSTLNG, that's Instagram and Twitter, and then Facebook, we're just Warrior Wrestling.
Awesome. Go check it out, guys. You won't be disappointed. Check out Warrior Wrestling, and of course, please go check out everything that we have going on over on our site as well at IndyWrestling.us, IndyWrestling.network. And until next time, wherever you're getting it, please support Indie Wrestling. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.